What is the price of a foot massage? For Amelia, 8 months pregnant and drowning in the sterile luxury of her penthouse, the cost was everything. She had a loving husband, a life of unimaginable wealth, and a baby on the way. From the outside, her world was perfect. But when a simple, desperate plea for comfort was met with a callous sneer and the slam of a door, the perfect facade began to crumble. She thought the worst pain was his rejection. She was wrong. The worst pain was discovering where he was really going, who he was with, and the devastating secret he'd kept buried for years. A secret that would unravel not just their marriage, but her entire reality. The air in the penthouse was always the same, a crisp, sterile 72 degrees, smelling faintly of white lilies and expensive ozone-purifying machines. It was an atmosphere Amelia had once found sophisticated. Now she just found it cold. Everything was cold. The vast white marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows that displayed the glittering city like a diamond necklace she couldn't touch, and most of all the space in the king-sized bed beside her. At 8 months pregnant, Amelia felt less like a cherished wife, and more like another one of Richard's prized possessions, carefully displayed and impeccably maintained. He had acquired her just as he had acquired Spectra Stark Industries, the multi-billion-dollar tech empire he ran with an iron fist. He'd acquired her from a world of art galleries and bohemian dreams, the daughter of a brilliant but financially disastrous painter. He had loved her raw potential, he'd said, and she, swept away by his power and charisma, had mistaken possession for passion. Tonight, the discomfort was a physical manifestation of her growing unease. Her ankles had swollen to the size of small grapefruits, and a dull, persistent ache radiated up her calves. Each step was a chore. The baby, a girl they'd decided to name Isabel, was pressing on a nerve in her lower back, a constant sharp reminder of the life she was carrying. A life she was bringing into this cold, silent palace in the sky. Richard was in his study, the door firmly closed, the muffled sounds of a conference call. His voice, sharp and decisive, bled into the hallway. He was always working, always closing a deal, always conquering. When he finally emerged 2 hours later, he looked as immaculate as ever in a tailored Tom Ford suit, his silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed. He loosened his tie, his eyes already on the stock ticker scrolling across the giant television screen in the living room. Richard Amelia's voice was soft, hesitant. It had grown that way over the years, sanded down by his impatience. He didn't look at her, his attention captivated by the red and green arrows on the screen. My feet they're really hurting tonight. The swelling is worse than ever. She shifted her weight, a small, involuntary wince crossing her face. I was wondering, could you, maybe just for a few minutes? He finally turned his head, his gaze dropping to her swollen feet, propped up on an ottoman. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, not sympathy, but a faint, almost imperceptible curl of disgust. Amelia, I've just spent 10 hours navigating a hostile takeover bid. My brain is fried. He gestured vaguely around the opulent room. We have a staff for a reason. The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering as shattered glass. A staff? She repeated, her voice barely a whisper. He sighed, the sound heavy with theatrical exasperation. Yes. A staff. You know the people we pay to do things? He picked up his briefcase, his movements clipped and efficient. Ask Maria. I'm sure she'd be happy to oblige. Ask the maid? The words felt foreign, ugly in her mouth. Maria had been with her family since before Amelia was born, a warm, kind woman who had come with her to this new life as a comfort, a piece of home. She was family, not just the maid. "Don't be so dramatic," Richard snapped, his patience finally gone. "It's a practical solution. I have to pack." A cold dread, colder than the marble beneath her feet, began to creep up Amelia's spine. Pack. For what? "You didn't mention a trip." It came up suddenly. "An emergency meeting with the board in Dubai. I have to be on a plane in 3 hours." He was already moving towards their bedroom, his back to her. The casual cruelty of it all was breathtaking. He could dismiss her pain, relegate her to the staff, and announce he was leaving the continent in the same breath, all without a single crack in his polished veneer. The city lights outside blurred as tears welled in Amelia's eyes. She wanted to scream, to throw something to shatter the cold silence of the room. But she didn't. She had learned long ago that Richard's anger was a storm she could not weather, especially not now. Instead, she did nothing. She sat there, her hands resting on her swollen belly, and listened to the sounds of him packing in the other room. The brisk zip of a suitcase, the clink of cufflinks being dropped into a leather valet. The sounds of her husband leaving. Maria found her like that. Half an hour later, a silent statue in the dimming light. The maid's kind, wrinkled face was etched with a concern that Amelia rarely saw in anyone else. "Mija. Are you all right? Mr. Stark is rushing around like a madman." Amelia couldn't answer. She just shook her head, a single tear finally tracing a hot path down her cheek. Maria knelt, her old bones groaning in protest, and gently took one of Amelia's swollen feet into her warm, work-roughened hands. The simple, unconditional act of kindness was Amelia's undoing. Sobs racked her body, deep guttural sounds of a heart breaking under the weight of 1,000 small cuts. Later, after Richard had gone, after the front door had clicked shut with a deafening finality, Amelia wandered into their master bedroom. It smelled of his cologne, a scent she used to adore that now felt suffocating. On the floor near the wastebasket was a small, stiff piece of cardstock, a discarded luggage tag from the airline's priority check-in. She picked it up. It had his name, of course. Richard Stark. Flight EY-100 to Abu Dhabi, connecting to Dubai. And then right below it was the information for the second passenger. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He'd only mentioned one meeting. He'd never said he was taking anyone with him. Her eyes scanned the name, expecting to see one of his executive assistants. The name was Vance. Sophia Vance. The name hit her like a physical blow. Sophia, the stunning, razor-sharp vice president of marketing at Spectra Stark. A woman with a brilliant smile, a law degree from Harvard, and a way of looking at Richard in board meetings that had always made Amelia's stomach clench. Amelia had told herself it was her own insecurity, her pregnancy-fueled paranoia. She had dismissed the late-night strategy sessions, the shared jokes she was never privy to, the way Richard's eyes would linger on Sophia just a second too long. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the luggage tag trembling in her hand. It wasn't just a business trip. Her husband, the father of her unborn child, had refused to touch her aching feet, told her to ask the maid, and then boarded a 14-hour flight to a city of opulence and sin with his mistress. He was probably settling into his first-class suite right now, clinking a glass of champagne with Sophia. While she was left alone in their cold, empty palace, the echo of his words, a cruel mantra in her mind. Ask the maid. Staring at the name on the tag, a new feeling began to bubble up through the grief and humiliation. It was hot and sharp, a feeling she hadn't felt in a very long time. It was anger, a righteous burning fury that cleared the tears from her eyes and solidified into a cold, hard resolve. He had underestimated her. He saw her as a pretty docile thing to be managed and occasionally admired. He had forgotten the fire she inherited from her artist father, the one who taught her that true value wasn't in what you owned, but in what you were willing to fight for. Richard had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he had left his pregnant wife behind. He had no idea he had just created his worst enemy. For 2 days, Amelia drifted through the penthouse like a ghost. She ate what Maria put in front of her, stared blankly at the glittering cityscape, and felt the baby move inside her, a tiny, innocent life, oblivious to the storm that had just broken. The hurt was a living thing, a physical weight in her chest. But beneath it, the anger simmered, a pilot light of rage waiting for fuel. The fuel came in the form of an Instagram post. It was a careless mistake, a slip of digital vanity. Sophia, who normally maintained a professionally sterile online presence, had a private account for close friends. A friend of a friend, a former gallery intern who still followed Amelia, sent her a screenshot. The photo was a masterpiece of curated luxury. 2 champagne flutes, glistening with condensation, were held aloft. In the background, through the window of what was unmistakably a hotel suite, was the iconic sail-shaped silhouette of the Burj Al Arab Jumeirah in Dubai. The caption was a single smug word. Finally. But it was the comment section that lit the fuse. A friend had commented, "That ring, don't hide the real news." Amelia zoomed in. On Sophia's left hand, the one holding the champagne flute, was a ring Amelia had never seen before. It wasn't an engagement ring, not on the traditional finger, but it was significant. A massive canary diamond, ostentatious and loud. A gift, a promise. Richard hadn't just taken his mistress to Dubai. He was celebrating with her. That was it. The grief shattered, and the anger, white, hot, and pure, took its place. The passive, heartbroken wife was gone. In her place was a woman on a mission. Her target was Richard's study. It was his sanctuary, his fortress of solitude. In 5 years of marriage, she had been inside it less than a dozen times. It was a space of dark wood, black leather, and the constant hum of high-end technology. My brain, he called it, and she was not welcome inside his brain. He keeps it locked, she told Maria, her voice hard, devoid of the tears from 2 nights ago. Maria looked at Amelia, seeing the new fire in her eyes. The maid's loyalty had always been to the kind girl she had helped raise, not the arrogant man who paid her salary. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. "There is a spare key for every room in this house, Miha, for emergencies, for the cleaning staff." She paused. "I believe this is an emergency." A few minutes later, Maria returned with a small brass key. It felt heavy in Amelia's hand, like the key to Pandora's box. With a deep breath, she walked to the study door and unlocked it. The room was just as she remembered, imposing and impersonal. 3 monitors were asleep on his massive desk, a silent testament to his empire. It smelled of him, of leather and power. For a moment, she felt a wave of intimidation. What was she even looking for? Proof of the affair, she had that. Financial documents. She wouldn't know what to make of them. She started with the obvious, his desk drawers. They were filled with files, all neatly labeled Q3 projections, Spectra Stark logistics, board minutes. It was all corporate jargon, meaningless to her. She was about to give up when she noticed the grain of the wood on the front of the desk. One panel near the bottom right didn't quite match. It was a subtle, almost invisible seam. Her artist's eye, trained to see the slightest variations in color and texture, caught it instantly. She ran her fingers along the edge. No handle, no button. She pressed on it, and a section of the panel clicked softly and sprang open, revealing a hidden compartment. It was a false drawer front. Inside was not a stack of files, but a single sleek silver laptop. Not his primary work computer, but something else. Something hidden. Her heart hammered. This was it. She took it out and placed it on the desk. It required a password, of course. She tried the obvious ones, Spectra Stark 1, Richard Stark, Isabel. All were rejected. Frustrated, she stared at the blank screen. What did he value? What was at the center of his universe? Himself. She typed in a new password, the Emperor. The screen flickered and the desktop loaded. It was a treasure trove of his secrets. Folders were labeled with cold clinical precision. Sophia, pre-enip, contingency. The Sophia folder was exactly what she expected: receipts for lavish gifts, reservations for hotels, even a draft of a lease agreement for a condo in her name. It was sickening, but not surprising. She clicked on the pre-nup folder. Inside was a scanned copy of the thick document she had signed a week before their wedding, her head full of love and trust. Richard's lawyers had called it a standard formality, a way to protect his existing assets. Her own lawyer, a young man overwhelmed by the sheer force of Richard's legal team, had advised her it was ironclad. But there was another document in the folder, one she had never seen before. It was titled to AWF Trust, Management Agreement. AWF, Amelia Weston Stark. Her maiden name was Weston. She opened it, her hands trembling. It was a legal agreement establishing a trust fund in her name. But the source of the funds was what made her gasp. It wasn't from Richard. The trust was funded by the sale of her late father's art catalogue. After his death, his entire collection and future royalties had been sold. Richard had handled the sale, telling her it had yielded a modest sum enough to pay off her father's debts and leave a small nest egg of around $50,000, which he had invested for her. According to this document, the sale had yielded over $15 million. The blood drained from her face. All these years she had believed she came into this marriage with nothing but love and a small sentimental inheritance. All this time she had been a multi-millionaire in her own right, and Richard had been her trustee. She scrolled frantically through the file, which contained years of financial statements. It was a horror story written in numbers. He had been using her trust as his personal slush fund. He'd borrowed millions to cover his own bad investments, used the funds as collateral for high-risk business loans for Spectra Stark, and siphoned off huge sums as management fees to fund his extravagant lifestyle, to fund gifts for Sophia trips to Dubai. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had systematically stolen from her father's legacy. The penthouse, the cars, the life he had so generously given her, she had paid for it herself without ever knowing. The final devastating blow came from a subfolder labeled Divorce Strategy. Inside was a single chilling document. It was a memo from his top lawyer outlining a plan. The prenup had a strict morality clause, and if either party engaged in behavior that could publicly embarrass the other, or the company, they would forfeit certain assets. Richard's plan was clear if she ever discovered his affair and tried to leave him. He would paint her as an unstable, emotional, and unfit mother. He would use his wealth and power to manufacture a scandal leak, fabricated stories to the press, and trigger the morality clause against her. He would not only keep his money, but would also use her instability to gain sole custody of their child, thereby maintaining control over the child's future inheritance, which included the remnants of her own trust fund. He wasn't just planning to leave her with nothing. He was planning to take her child and the very last of what her father had left her. Amelia leaned back in the leather chair, the cold reality washing over her. This was not a simple case of infidelity. This was a calculated long-term campaign of fraud, deception, and psychological abuse. He hadn't married her for her raw potential. He had married her for her trust fund. She wasn't a wife. She was an asset to be stripped. The phone on the desk buzzed. It was a text message notification on the laptop screen, synced from his phone in Dubai. It was from Sophia. "Thinking of you. Can't wait for our future to begin. The deal is almost ready. Phoenix Dynamics won't know what hit them." Phoenix Dynamics. Amelia frowned. That was Spectra Stark's biggest competitor, a ruthless rival firm that had been trying to gain market share for years. Why was Sophia mentioning them? Was she helping Richard with a counter-strategy, or was it something else? A new piece of the puzzle clicked into place, dark and ominous. The woman her husband was cheating with was talking about their biggest rival. Amelia took a photo of the message with her own phone. She saved copies of every file from the secret laptop onto a small encrypted flash drive she found in one of the drawers. As she shut down the computer and slid it back into its hidden compartment, the fear and shock began to recede, replaced by an icy calm. The game had changed. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about survival. It was about justice for her father. And most importantly, it was about protecting her unborn child from the monster she had married. He thought she was a fragile doll in his gilded cage. He was about to find out she was the one holding the key. The next morning, the sterile penthouse felt different. It was no longer a cage, but a staging ground. The city skyline outside was no longer a taunting display of a life she couldn't touch, but a map of a battlefield. Amelia moved with a purpose she hadn't felt in years. The flash drive in her pocket, a cold, hard secret. She knew she couldn't fight this war alone. Richard's legal team was a legion of sharks who had built their careers on crushing people like her. Her first thought was to find her own lawyer, but who could she trust? Anyone Richard could buy, bribe, or intimidate was a liability. Then a name surfaced from the depths of her memory, a name her father had spoken with a mixture of awe and terror. Eleanor Vance. If you're ever in real trouble, her father had told her once years ago, after a smaller gallery owner had tried to cheat him. I mean the kind of trouble that can swallow you whole. You call Eleanor Vance. She's not just a lawyer. She's a goddamn dragon. Expensive as hell and twice as fierce. But she eats men like that. For breakfast. The name gave her pause. Vance. The same last name as Sophia. Was it a coincidence? In a city of millions it was possible. But in the twisted new reality of her life, she couldn't afford to believe in coincidences. This could be a trap, or it could be fate. She had to take the risk. She found the firm online, Vance and Associates. Litigation, strategy, victory. The website was minimalist, brutalist in its design. No smiling headshots, no vague promises, just a name, an address, and a reputation that preceded it. Amelia made the call from a burner phone she'd had Maria purchase with cash. The receptionist was polite but firm. Ms. Vance's schedule was booked for the next 6 months. An initial consultation, if one could even be secured, required a $50,000 retainer. "I understand, Amelia," said her voice steady. "Please tell her that Arthur Weston's daughter is calling. Tell her it's about a trust, a company called Spectra Stark, and a man who is about to lose everything." She hung up, not knowing if her message would ever reach the dragon's lair. But less than an hour later, her burner phone rang. "This is Eleanor Vance." The voice was exactly as Amelia had imagined, low, gravelly, and utterly devoid of pleasantries. It was the voice of a woman who didn't have time for nonsense. "Thank you for calling me back." Amelia began, her heart pounding. "I have a 10-minute window between a deposition and a flight to Zurich. Your father was a brilliant man who died with his genius locked away by jackals. You have my attention for 9 more minutes. Talk." In a rush of words, Amelia laid out the basics. The pregnancy, the trip to Dubai, the hidden laptop, the $15 million trust, the fraud, the plan to take her child. She spoke with a clarity and precision that surprised even herself. The anger had burned away the fog of despair. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a terrifying moment, Amelia thought she'd been dismissed. "Where are you right now?" Eleanor finally asked. My home. Richard's penthouse. Is it secure? I don't know. He has cameras, but I don't think he checks them. He trusts his security system." "Trust is a luxury for fools and saints," Eleanor retorted. "You will leave that apartment within the hour. Pack a single bag with essentials. Nothing that can be traced. No credit cards, no personal phone, no logging into your email. Bring the flash drive and any physical documents you have. A car will be waiting for you at the service entrance in precisely 45 minutes. The driver's name will be Hector. Don't speak to him. He won't speak to you. Do you understand?" "Yes, but where am I going?" "You're going to a safe place. Richard Stark is a man of immense resources and 0 scruples. The moment he suspects you know the truth, he will bring the full weight of his empire down on you. He will try to have you declared mentally unstable, a danger to your child. He will freeze your assets, or what he's told you are your assets. We cannot fight him if you are in his cage. From this moment on, Amelia Stark ceases to exist. You are now my client, and my clients become ghosts until the battle is won." Before Amelia could ask another question, Eleanor added one last thing. "One more thing. You mentioned a woman, Sophia Vance." "Yes," Amelia said, her breath catching. "Is she related to you? A dry, mirthless chuckle came down the line. "The world is full of Vances, my dear. Some are dragons, others are snakes. It's important to know the difference. I'll see you shortly." The line went dead. Amelia moved like a whirlwind. She threw essentials into a nondescript duffel bag Maria provided. Old clothes, toiletries, the burner phone. The last thing she packed was a small framed photo of her father. His face crinkled in a smile. Saying goodbye to Maria was the hardest part. The older woman held her embrace fierce. "You be strong, Mija. You have your father's fire. Let it burn. He'll fire you, Maria." Amelia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Let him," Maria said with a defiant sniff. "I have my savings and my dignity. Something he knows nothing about." Amelia slipped out the service entrance, her heart pounding. pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilarating freedom. A black town car was idling by the curb exactly as promised. The driver, a large, impassive man, simply opened the back door for her. The interior was dark and cool. As the car pulled away from the curb, Amelia looked back at the gleaming glass tower that had been her prison. She was out. The car drove for over an hour, heading out of the city and into the rolling hills of the countryside. It finally turned down a long tree-lined driveway, coming to a stop in front of a beautiful but unassuming farmhouse. It was the antithesis of the penthouse, warm, welcoming, made of wood and stone. Eleanor Vance was waiting on the porch. She was older than Amelia expected, perhaps in her late 60s, with a mane of silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored black dress, and her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, seemed to see right through Amelia, assessing every strength and every weakness. This was, without a doubt, the dragon. Mrs. Stark. Eleanor said, her voice the same gravelly tone from the phone. "Welcome to the war room." Inside the house was a surprising mix of rustic charm and high-tech security. Laptops and monitors were set up on a large farmhouse table. The air smelled of old books and brewing coffee. For the next 8 hours they worked. Amelia, guided by Eleanor's sharp, incisive questions, recounted every detail of her marriage, every conversation, every slight, every suspicion. Eleanor listened, her face an unreadable mask, while her fingers flew across a keyboard. Building a file, a timeline, a strategy. She took the flash drive and, with the help of a tech expert on video call, delved deeper into the files, uncovering layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts that made Amelia's head spin. "He's more than a cheat." Eleanor concluded, her voice grim as she stared at the screen. "He's a predator. And Spectra Stark isn't the fortress he pretends it is. It's a house of cards built on your father's legacy. He's been cooking the books for years. This upcoming sale he's planning, it isn't about expansion. It's a desperate cash-out before the whole thing implodes." Eleanor stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening fields. "He believes you are his greatest weakness. A pregnant, emotional woman he can easily discredit and control. We are going to make you his downfall." How Amelia asked, feeling a surge of hope for the first time. Eleanor turned, her blue eyes glinting in the lamplight. "First, we use his own tactics against him. He wants to control the narrative. We'll create our own. Second, we use his arrogance as a weapon. He's in Dubai, basking in his own glory, completely unaware that the ground is about to give way beneath him. And third," she paused, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face, "we introduce a variable he could never anticipate. You mentioned his mistress is talking to Phoenix Dynamics. Let's find out exactly what she's saying, shall we? It's time to see what the snake is up to in the garden." Dubai was a city built on ambition, a shimmering mirage of glass and gold rising from the desert. For Richard Stark, it was a home away from home, a playground where his wealth and ego could stretch out unconstrained. For Sophia Vance, it was the perfect hunting ground. Their suite at the Burj Al Arab was obscene in its luxury, a 2-story monument to excess with a private cinema, a rotating canopy bed, and a butler who materialized at the slightest whisper. Richard lapped it up, seeing it as his due, the just reward for his brilliance. Sophia saw it as a gilded cage for her prey. She played her part to perfection. She was the adoring, intelligent mistress, her body molded against his, her laughter echoing at all his jokes. She listened with rapt attention as he pontificated about his business acumen, his voice booming with arrogance. The board was panicking. He gloated one evening, a glass of 25-year-old Macallan in his hand, as they stood on their private terrace overlooking the Persian Gulf, crying about Phoenix dynamics eating into our market share. They don't see the big picture. I had to fly all the way out here to hold their hands and reassure our investors. Sophia traced a finger along his jaw. You're the only one who can, Richard. You built Spectra Stark from nothing. They're fools to doubt you. Exactly. He preened his chest, puffing out. And this sale? This is the master stroke. They think I'm selling off a key division out of weakness. In reality, I'm securing a war chest that will allow us to crush Phoenix for good. They'll never see it coming. Every word he said was a lie, and Sophia knew it. She had been cultivated by Phoenix Dynamics for 2 years with a single objective. Get close to Richard Stark. Identify the rot inside his empire, and help Phoenix acquire it for pennies on the dollar. She was not a corporate spy in the traditional sense. She was a demolition expert. Her job was to find the cracks in the foundation and plant the dynamite. The trust fund had been the ultimate crack. Her research team at Phoenix had flagged it months ago, a significant privately managed trust connected to Stark's wife with unusual and aggressive financial activity. They had tasked Sophia with getting close enough to confirm their suspicions and find out just how deep the rot went. Richard, blinded by her beauty and his own hubris, had made it astonishingly easy. He'd practically confessed his fraud to her, framing it as clever financial maneuvering. That evening, while Richard was on a self-important call with his CFO, Sophia made her own move. She sat on the edge of the marble bathtub, the picture of casual relaxation, and sent a coded message to her handler at Phoenix Dynamics. Handler status. Sophia. The lion is proud of his roar. He thinks the sale is his salvation. He's confirmed leveraging the AWF trust to cover operating losses for the last 3 quarters. The company is a hollow shell. Stock valuation is pure fiction. Handler. He has no idea he's selling to us through a front corporation. Sophia none. He's too arrogant to even consider it. He's focused on the payout and the ring. Handler. The canary diamond. A nice touch. He's fully invested in you. Sophia. He thinks he's buying my future. He has no idea I'm here to steal his. Handler. The board at Phoenix is getting nervous. They want to move. Sophia. Tell them to hold. The price isn't low enough yet. I need to start a rumor. Something to trigger a small sell-off before the acquisition is announced. Let it bleed a little. We want him desperate when he signs the papers. She deleted the conversation, her reflection in the polished gold fixtures of the bathroom cool and composed. There was a thrill to the game, a cold satisfaction in playing a man like Richard so completely. He saw her as an upgrade to his wife, a younger, smarter, more ambitious model. He didn't realize that to her, he was just a mark. A stepping stone to a 7-figure bonus and a seat on the board at Phoenix Dynamics. Her only lingering thought was of the wife Amelia. In her research, Sophia had seen photos of her, a soft, beautiful woman who looked out of place in Richard's sharp-edged world. A pregnant wife. Sophia felt a fleeting, inconvenient pang of something that might have been guilt. She squashed it immediately. This was business. Amelia was collateral damage in a war she didn't even know was being fought. In the world of corporate takeovers, there was no room for sentiment. Her thoughts were interrupted by Richard entering the bathroom. He ended his call and tossed his phone onto a plush towel. "Problem solved," he announced, pouring himself another drink from the bar cart. "My CFO is a worrier. He's concerned about some discrepancies in the third quarter accounting. I told him to fix it. That's what I pay him for." Sophia rose from the edge of the tub, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You're under so much pressure. Let me help you forget about it." As she kissed him, her mind was already working. Accounting discrepancies. That was the rumor she needed. It was perfect. Vague enough to be deniable, but serious enough to spook investors. Tomorrow, she would make an anonymous call to a well-connected financial blogger she had on her payroll. She would leak the information, a carefully placed drop of poison, into the well of Wall Street. Richard, lost in her embrace, was oblivious. He felt powerful, desired, in complete control of his universe. He was standing at the pinnacle of his success, celebrating with his brilliant mistress in a palace in the sky. He didn't feel the ground crumbling beneath his feet. He didn't see the serpent smiling up at him, ready to strike. He was too busy admiring the view from the top of the cliff to notice he was already falling. The farmhouse had become Amelia's world. Days bled into one another, marked not by the sun, but by the steady influx of information from Eleanor's team. The large table was now covered in a web of connections, linking shell corporations' offshore bank accounts and key players. At the center were two photos, Richard smiling his confident, predatory smile, and Sophia, her beauty, a calculated mask. Amelia's due date was less than a month away, and the weight of it all, the betrayal, the legal battle, the sheer enormity of Richard's deception pressed down on her. Some moments the stress was so immense she could barely breathe. But then she would feel a kick, a flutter from within, and her resolve would harden like steel. This was not just for her anymore. This was for the little girl who deserved to be born into a world free of her father's shadow. Eleanor was a force of nature, a whirlwind of focused energy. Her team of forensic accountants and private investigators worked around the clock, digging deeper into Richard's financial labyrinth. "He got sloppy," Eleanor said one evening, pointing to a complex flow chart on a monitor. "When he started using your trust to plug holes in Spectra Stark's operating budget, he crossed a line from immoral to blatantly illegal. He's been reporting false earnings to the SEC for at least 18 months. We have him, Amelia. We have him dead to rights." It was the news Amelia had been waiting for, but the victory felt hollow. The proof of his crimes didn't erase the years of lies. Then came the second twist, the one that changed the very nature of the war they were fighting. It came from an old, semi-retired private investigator Eleanor kept on retainer for deep background checks. His name was Gus, and he specialized in digging up ghosts. "You're not going to believe this, Eleanor," Gus said, over a secure video call, his voice raspy. "I was digging into Stark's early life, pre-Spectra, looking for a pattern. We all know he's a widower, right? First wife Laura Parker died in a boating accident in the Hamptons about 10 years ago. Tragic story." "Get to the point, Gus," Eleanor said, her patience thin. "Right. So the story is they were out on his boat. A storm rolls in. The boat capsizes, he survives. She doesn't. Her body was never recovered. He inherited her small fortune, which he used as seed money for his first big venture. It's the foundation myth of the great Richard Stark." "And," Eleanor pressed. Gus leaned closer to his camera. "The thing is, Laura Parker wasn't her real name. It was an alias. She was a runaway from a wealthy family in Louisiana who'd changed her name to escape them. Her real name." "You sitting down?" Eleanor didn't flinch. "I'm always sitting down, Gus." Her real name was Eleanor Vance. Amelia, who had been listening from the corner, froze. The room went silent. "That's not possible," Amelia whispered. "Oh, it's possible," Gus rasped. "Different Eleanor Vance, obviously. Not you, counselor, but what are the odds he marries a woman named Eleanor Vance? She dies in a convenient accident right after he gains control of her finances, and then years later he starts an affair with a woman named Sophia Vance." Eleanor Vance, the lawyer, was uncharacteristically still. Her face, usually an unreadable mask of professional detachment, was pale. The coincidence was too great, too statistically improbable to be random. It was a pattern, a fetish, a dark, twisted signature. "Gus," Eleanor said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Find her. Find the first Eleanor Vance. I don't care what it takes. Find out if she's really dead." The next discovery came from Eleanor's tech expert, a young woman named Zara, with purple hair and an encyclopedic knowledge of the dark web. She had been tasked with investigating Sophia. "I got into her encrypted communications from Phoenix," Zara announced, swiveling in her chair. "She's a pro, but everyone makes mistakes." She pulled up the text exchange Amelia had photographed in Richard's study. "The deal is almost ready. Phoenix Dynamics won't know what hit them." "We assumed this meant she was helping Richard screw over Phoenix," Zara explained. "But I cross-referenced it with the intel we have on the supposed buyer for the Spectra Stark division. It's a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands called Ethelred Holdings." "Ethelred?" Eleanor frowned. "Ethelred the Unready, the weak English king who was blindsided by Viking invasions." "Exactly," Zara said with a grin. "It's a joke. Ethelred Holdings is a front. It's funded entirely and secretly by Phoenix Dynamics. Sophia isn't helping Richard prepare for a deal. She's the architect of his demise. She's been feeding him bad information, stroking his ego, and setting him up to sell his company to his greatest enemy for a fraction of its worth. The message, Phoenix Dynamics won't know what hit them, was a lie for Richard's benefit in case he ever saw it. The perfect misdirection. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. Richard wasn't just a cheat and a fraud being played by his mistress. He was a pawn in a massive corporate takeover. A king being checkmated in a game he didn't even know he was playing. And his choice of mistress, another Vance, wasn't just a coincidence. It was a symptom of a pathology, a deep-seated darkness that hinted at something far worse than financial crimes. Suddenly the timeline became critical. Richard and Sophia were moving to finalize the sale. They had to act before he signed those papers, before the money vanished into a web of international accounts, and before he could return to the US to execute his plan against Amelia. But just as Eleanor was about to give the order to file the injunctions and lawsuits they had prepared, Amelia cried out, doubling over in pain. A sharp, undeniable contraction seized her body. "Eleanor!" She gasped, her face pale, with a mixture of pain and terror. "It's time. The baby is coming." The war had just become a race against time, fought on two fronts, one in a hospital room and one in the boardrooms and banks across the world. And Amelia was at the center of it all, her body about to bring a new life into the world, just as she was fighting to tear an old one down. The delivery room was a sterile white cocoon, a world away from the chaos of their legal battle. For 12 agonizing hours, there were no lawsuits, no fraudulent trusts, no cheating husbands. There was only Amelia, her body locked in a primal struggle with Eleanor, surprisingly by her side. The formidable lawyer had transformed her voice, losing its gravelly edge, becoming a source of steady, calm encouragement. At 3:17 a.m., Lily Weston was born screaming with a healthy set of lungs. As the nurse placed the tiny, wrinkled baby on Amelia's chest, the world fell away. All the anger, all the fear melted in the face of the overwhelming, fierce love she felt for this little person. She had done it. She had brought her daughter safely into the world. Holding Lily, Amelia knew she wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for this child's future, a future of truth and light. Her resolve, which had been forged in anger, was now armor-plated with a mother's love. While Amelia recovered, Eleanor unleashed the storm. The first strike was silent and digital. At precisely 9:00 a.m. in New York, just as the markets opened, Zara the tech expert executed a carefully planned leak. She sent an encrypted data packet containing proof of Sophia Vance's corporate espionage, her communications with Phoenix Dynamics, her manipulation of Spectra Stark's internal data to a select group of top financial journalists and market regulators. The information was anonymous, untraceable, but undeniably authentic. The second strike was a legal bombshell. At 9:05 a.m., Eleanor's army of lawyers filed a series of massive coordinated lawsuits in 3 different jurisdictions. The primary suit was on behalf of Amelia for breach of fiduciary duty fraud and misappropriation of the AWF Trust, seeking hundreds of millions in damages and restitution. Attached to it was an emergency injunction backed by the damning evidence from Richard's secret laptop, petitioning the court to freeze every known asset belonging to Richard Stark and Spectra Stark Industries, pending the fraud investigation. The third and most devastating strike was personal. Eleanor made a single phone call to the district attorney's office in Suffolk County, New York. She spoke to the head of the cold case unit. "I have new information regarding the accidental death of a woman named Eleanor Laura Vance 10 years ago," she said, her voice like ice. "And I have a witness who is willing to testify about the financial motive for her death. In Dubai, it was just after 5 p.m. Richard Stark, feeling like the king of the world, walked into a sleek conference room in the Dubai International Financial Center. Sophia was by his side, looking radiant in a sharp white power suit. Across the table were the representatives from Ethelred Holdings, the anonymous buyers for his company's key division. The contracts were laid out on the table. The signing pens were ready. This was the culmination of his grand plan, the moment he would secure the massive payout that would solve all his problems. He picked up the pen. "Well, gentlemen," he said with a smug smile, "shall we make history?" Just as the nib touched the paper, his phone and Sophia's phone and the phones of every executive in the room began to buzz violently. A cascade of notifications, news alerts from Bloomberg, Reuters, the Wall Street Journal. Breaking Spectra Stark Industries. CEO Richard Stark accused of massive fraud assets, frozen by court order. Leaked docs. Phoenix Dynamics, implicated in corporate espionage, plot targeting. Rival Spectra Stark. VP Sophia Vance, named. Richard stared at his phone, his face turning ashen. The words didn't make sense. It was impossible. A mistake. "What is this?" he stammered, looking at Sophia. But Sophia was staring at her own phone, her mask of cool composure shattering into a million pieces. Her own company had just thrown her under the bus, issuing a statement condemning her rogue actions and terminating her employment, effective immediately. The men from Ethelred Holdings stood up abruptly. "This meeting is over," their leader said, his voice cold. "The offer is withdrawn." They filed out of the room without a backward glance. Richard's world, which had seemed so solid, so glorious just moments before, was vaporizing in real time. His phone rang. It was his CFO from New York, his voice frantic. "Richard, it's a catastrophe. The SEC has halted trading on our stock. The banks are calling. Our credit lines are frozen. The court order. It's ironclad. It's from your wife, Richard." It's Amelia. The name barely registered. His quiet, docile, pregnant wife. It couldn't be. His mind reeled, trying to process the scale of the disaster. Fraud. Frozen assets. Amelia. He looked at Sophia, his partner in this grand venture, and saw not an ally, but a stranger whose face was contorted in a mask of pure panic and fury. "You," he snarled, finally understanding a fraction of the betrayal. "Phoenix Dynamics. You were working for them all along, and you were stealing from your wife." She shrieked back her own ambitions, turning to dust around her. "You pathetic, arrogant fool!" The room, which was meant to be the site of his greatest triumph, had become a war zone. His empire was collapsing, his mistress was his enemy, and the architect of his destruction was the one person he had dismissed completely. Fueled by a tidal wave of narcissistic rage, Richard stormed out of the conference room. He had one goal, one single-minded purpose. He had to get back to New York. He had to get to Amelia. He would make her pay. He would crush her. He booked the first flight he could find, his mind a maelstrom of denial and fury. He was Richard Stark. He didn't lose. He would fix this. He had no idea that he was flying directly into the heart of the trap that had been so perfectly set for him. The cage was no longer Amelia's. It was his, and the door was about to slam shut. Richard landed at JFK in a state of primal fury. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the 14-hour flight pacing the confines of his first-class cabin like a conned animal downing whiskey and barking at flight attendants. His multi-million-dollar world had been dismantled mid-flight, and the only coherent thought that pierced through his rage-addled mind was that Amelia was at the center of it. His meek, compliant Amelia. It was a betrayal so profound, so unthinkable, he could barely comprehend it. He stormed through the airport, a man accustomed to seamless luxury travel, now finding every step an infuriating obstacle. He didn't go to his office, which he knew would be swarming with lawyers and reporters. He went to the one place he still considered his domain, his fortress. He went home. He used his key on the penthouse door, expecting to find it locked. The locks changed, but it opened with a soft click. The silence inside was unnerving. The air was no longer sterile and cold. The faint scent of lilies was gone, replaced by the neutral scent of clean air. The vast white space seemed to be holding its breath. "Amelia," he roared, his voice echoing off the marble floors. "Where are you?" He strode through the living room, his eyes scanning for any sign of her. He was ready for a fight, for tears, for hysterics. He was prepared to verbally dismantle her, to terrify her back into submission. He found her in the nursery. The final vestiges of Richard's composure crumbled. He was cornered, exposed. But his narcissistic rage had one last place to go. The baby. He hissed, his eyes locking on the bundle in Amelia's arms. "That child is a Stark. You will not take my child from me. I will fight you with everything I have." Amelia looked down at Lily, her expression softening. "Her name is Lily Weston," she said softly. "She will carry my name and my father's name, a name you tried to tarnish. She will have nothing of yours. Not your money, and certainly not your poison." As if on cue, there was a firm knock at the penthouse door. Richard's head snapped towards the sound. "Who is that?" That Eleanor said a grim satisfaction in her voice would be the other variable. The one from 10 years ago. The front door opened and 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside. Behind them was a man in a detective suit, and beside the detective was a woman. She was in her late 40s with haunted eyes and lines of hardship etched on her face, but her features were unmistakable. Richard stared at her, his face draining of all color, a strangled sound escaping his lips. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Hello, Richard," the woman said, her voice trembling but resolute. "It's been a long time." The detective stepped forward. "Richard Stark, you are under arrest for the suspected murder of Eleanor Vance." He paused, gesturing to the woman beside him, who, as you can see, is very much alive. She'll be testifying about how you tried to kill her in a boating accident after she discovered your first foray into financial fraud. It was the final fatal blow. The ghost of his past, the first Eleanor Vance, had returned to bury him. He had been so consumed with the war in front of him that he never saw the one sneaking up from behind. As the officers moved forward to cuff him, Richard's eyes wide with terror and defeat met Amelia's one last time. In her calm, steady gaze, he finally saw the truth. He had not been beaten by lawyers or investigators. He had been beaten by the woman he had underestimated, the wife he had dismissed. He had lit the match, and she had summoned an inferno that had burned his entire world to the ground. The last thing he heard as they led him away was the soft, gentle cooing of his daughter, a daughter he would never know. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can often ignite our greatest strengths. She was dismissed, deceived, and left for broke, but she refused to be a victim. She fought back not just for herself, but for her child, and for the legacy of the father she loved. Her journey from a gilded cage to a life of true, meaningful purpose shows that our real worth is never defined by what others think of us, but by the fire we find within ourselves when everything else has burned away. What did you think of Amelia's incredible transformation? Who was the bigger villain in this story? Richard or Sophia? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and resilience, please give this video a like, share it with someone who loves a story of triumph, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales of drama and revenge. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for listening.